Hello, everybody, and welcome to the South Florida Power BI user group. Thank you for making the time in your busy schedule to join us here today. And we will be watching today a presentation from Jessica Jolly on successful Power BI report implementation challenges and solutions. And with me here, Jessica Jolly. Hello, Jessica. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
All right, I'm doing well, thank you. And welcome to the South Florida Power BI.
Yeah, can you bring me some sun? I'm up in Maine. I need some sun.
Oh my.
Bring me some sun. I'll
All
send you some
right.
rain. You give me some sun.
Not a fair trade here. you know, and glad to hear that. You're here with us. Really appreciate that.
I'm honored to be here.
All right. And can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Sure. Do you want me to start right now? Because I've got a nice little slide that's got all that, or would you rather just me
Just something
tell you?
short. Just something short. Just a quick intro there.
Okay.
You mentioned that you are in Maine right now, and
I am. Yep. I normally live in Chicago, but my mother has a house in Western Maine. So my husband and I decided we would come up here for the summer, and we're still here, but we'll probably go back around Christmas time. But it's been great. We've been hiking, we've been biking, climbing mountains. It's really been wonderful.
that's really
So
exciting.
yeah, it's been a nice change from living in Chicago. Although I love living in Chicago, but everything I loved doing was closed. So, hey, the forest is not closed.
There we go. So you are just adjusting here accordingly to the situation here, yet making the best of it.
What else can you do? What else can you do?
It's a great approach right there. You know. And all right, just would like to remind everybody to please take a minute to like the video, comment, and subscribe. Remember that during this presentation will be a very exciting and interesting presentation. We would like to get a lot of your feedback so it becomes a bit more interactive. And for that, all you gotta do is subscribe so you can sign in and enter your questions in live chat. All right, so we'll be monitoring here, and also please make sure just give us some feedback. Let us know if everyone can hear. You can hear us well. Thank you, Chewy, for the feedback.
Wait, is that my friend Chewy Varela? Is that my
Yes,
guy? Hey,
he's
Chewy
here
Varela.
watching us.
Hi, how are ya? Yay, Chewy. Welcome.
Hello, Chewy, and thank you for the feedback. Let me take a quick look here, and let me know also how does the sound for Jessica sound, please. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
All
Can
right.
you hear me now?
Hello.
Hello.
we are all right. I think I improved here my sound, so let me know, folks.
All right. I won't sing because then you'll all hang up. So I'll just talk.
All right, and all right, everybody can hear you well. Yeah, they
Yay!
just said Jessica is on stereo, so they can hear you well. And let me know if things change or
Stereo.
yes.
Stereo is good. I was thinking about that today. When I was in high school, I wanted a stereo more than anything. And now I was looking around and I was like, how many different ways do we have to play music in a high quality format? It's incredible. But, back when I was in high school, a stereo was the thing.
I hear you there. That's quite a change now, huh? In terms of how
It really
technology is
is.
so fast evolved here, being able to
I
get
know it.
that.
It's crazy.
All right. So thank you for the feedback, everybody. And I see here. That was funny. Some Roger Lewis said that Jessica is good. My sound's a bit too soft. And then he says, maybe because I'm too far away from Australia. All right,
Oh,
Professor.
wow. Well, I'll just normally I'm the kind of person that when I worked in an office, people told me, can you please keep your voice down? So, it's very rare for me to be told that people cannot hear me. So,
All right. All right, folks. Let us get started here then. Are you all set? I think everybody has a few minutes to those last stragglers. And I know that Jessica is more than ready. She has been telling
I
me here,
am ready.
like, I'm ready to go.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. But didn't you want to say who the next presenter would be? I
I
thought you
think,
said you wanted to say that.
yeah, I think we will leave that to the end here so everybody can stay tuned
Oh, yeah.
all the way to the end. Really enjoy Jessica's presentation and stay tuned to the end where we're going to make some more announcements.
Oh, okay. He's got a baiting you to stay on. Good. Well, I'll do my part and see if I can keep people interested.
I'm quite sure they will definitely enjoy it. It's a great topic. Whether you are a tech professional or business professional, there is value to everyone. And I believe there is also some takeaways potentially there.
Potentially,
Jessica?
yep, yep. I'm
All
happy
right.
to try to pull that together and send it off to a list of people that you provide me, or however you want to do that. That's fine.
Absolutely. So, folks, have to stay tuned to the end here so you can get all the goodies and check out our next presentations as well. With that, all right, let me, let Jessica take it away. All right,
Okay.
Jessica, it's all you now.
Oh dear. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen. So for a second, it's going to look a little weird. Hold on until I get it into. Okay. So, Adriano, can you confirm that you're seeing my slide there? Yay! Okay, so hopefully everybody else can as well. So, as Adriano said, this presentation is really going to address some learnings that I've gained in the process of developing Power BI reports. And I wanted to write some of these things down because they were really I won't say showstoppers, but if I had thought about them ahead of time and asked some questions ahead of time, I would have saved myself a lot of aggravation as well as the customer. So I thought, well, let me try to write these down and share them with others. This is a little bit more about me. I am a Microsoft certified trainer. I do have the MCSC, which is now the outdated certificate for data analytics, and I also did the DA 100. I encourage everybody to get out there and do it. It's a fair exam, so if you've been using Power BI at all, you'll feel very comfortable taking that exam. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love to get in contact with people, and I actually do post on LinkedIn. I will say every week, but I try to be pretty regular about it. I Twitter not often, or not as much as I should, I'll say, but I am on Twitter, and that's my handle there. And I do blog, and I have a website. My blog is, woo, I need some work on my blog, but that's okay. It's there. So hope springs eternal. I live in the Chicago suburbs, and some of the things that I love to do, I love American history. That's what I majored in college. I love to hike, swim, and bike. I love to knit, needlepoint, and quilt. So lots of things I love doing. And one of my favorite things to do is after I've been training on Power BI is to find a knitting store and just go look at the color and feel the yarn, because it's such a nice change of pace from the hard facts of data. Okay, I'm going to keep moving because I doubt there's any questions about that. I'm going to go to our agenda now. So today this is going to do a deep dive. So there's going to be a lot of detail here. So you may want to get your pens and pencils out. So I'm going to talk first about project timelines. Then I'm going to talk about data and credentials, licensing, the data model, DAX, slicers versus the filter pane, workspaces, a side note, training, suggested checkpoints, and don't forget about. And just in case you're wondering, my don't forget about slide is kind of my catch-all, so that as I was creating the deck, I went, oh, I got to talk about that. So I'd put it on my don't forget about slide. So lots of details in here. And as Adriano said, I really do welcome feedback or questions or comments. I don't know everything. And if you've had a different experience or something that you want to contribute, it will just be that much richer if you do that. So please feel free to do that. I welcome it. Alrighty, here you go. You have found the right person to work on your Power BI reports. So let's say that it's somebody external. Most of what I'm going to say today applies to an external party, so a contractor, a freelancer. Much of what I'm going to say could and does apply to internal people as well. But you'll find that this is really slightly biased towards trying to hire somebody to create a report for you and the things you have to think about, because it's coming from my experience. So again, if it doesn't apply because you never hire anybody external, no problem. Just ignore it. Just discard that piece of the message. All right. You found them? You think you're good to go? You're not. You're not good to go. Okay. The last thing you should do is get started with, oh, here we go, make our report now. There are a lot of things that you need to stop and ponder before you extend that offer or start the project. And I am going to cover, as I said, some of these in a lot of detail, and I may forget things. So like I said before, and I can't stress it enough, please jump in if you have comments, questions, you want to disagree. I'm perfectly fine with that. All right, let's start by talking about project timelines. And this is something I find that people just don't take into consideration. So here you can see I'm building a simplified timeline, and I'm going to highlight places where there can be delays and misunderstandings and breaks in communication. So the first thing that you're going to do after you've found somebody is you're going to do those reference and background checks. Now you may say, well, we don't do them as rigorously for a freelancer, but in my experience, there is still some of that done. So you are going to want to make sure that you've factored that into the timeline. Then that person, if they are a freelancer external party, is probably going to have to go through your company culture training. So what I mean by that is your code of conduct, any NDA, non-competes, all those kinds of things that your company requires for someone to work in your environment. They'll have to go through that. And they'll have to then, once they've done that, they'll have to apply for their credentials. So this is your first big hurdle. What does your company require before somebody can apply for a credential? And what I mean by that is, let's say that you're going to work for big corporation XYZ. Are you going to be giving them your external party a email address to use when on the project? If you are, then you're going to want to think about that SLA from your company's perspective, because in my experience, those things don't happen overnight. So you're definitely going to want to plan and put that in your timeline. The next big step here, the next big gotcha that you're going to want to consider is the data source credentials. A lot of times people make this assumption that if I give you the credential to be able to log into our system, an email address, whatever it is, that's automatically going to give you the appropriate data source credentials. And that's usually not the case in my experience. So you're going to have to factor in time to complete the credentials for, the main entry into the system, and then you'll have complete the data source credentials application as well. So that will take some time as well. Be sure you know what those SLAs are for that. Then finally, if you are going to want that person to communicate in teams and so on and so forth, you'll need to factor that in as well. So A lot of times because we're embedded in our organization, we've worked for a big company for a long time. Trust me, I once worked for one of the largest companies in the world, so I know about these things. We don't even remember how hard it was to, get set up to begin with. Or maybe we've been at that business so long, it wasn't an issue at that point in time. But security is very serious these days, and a lot of these things require a lot of hoops to jump through. So that's the first thing you need to take into consideration for your project timelines. The next thing that I would strongly encourage you to be aware of is don't assume that once the contractor or the external party has access to the credentials, that it's clear to them how to, go to your portal and get in. I mean, you cannot assume that. You should make time or ensure that there's some type of training document for both getting in through the firewall and the portal and getting to the data source. Okay, I'm gonna change the slide now. And then I want to remind you of something that actually just was brought to my attention a couple weeks ago, and I remember it from where I used to work. So how long do the credentials last? That's a really important factor, because depending on how tight the security is, those credentials could expire in the middle of a project, or before it's over, and that can, depending on how you've set up what you're expecting from the person who's creating the Power BI report, that can make you dead in the water. So that's one of the things that you need to be aware of, is how long the credentials last, and are the data source credentials coordinated with the access credentials? So will the data source credentials go on the same time frame as the access credentials, or do you need to be aware of those separately? The other nasty surprise that you can get into is that a lot of big companies these days will limit how long a freelancer, or how many times a freelancer can renew their credentials. And that's a lot of times because of the legality issues. They don't want to be accused of having the freelancer treating them, expecting them to be almost like an employee, but paying them as a freelancer. So they will tell freelancers, you have to go away on hiatus for 6 months, and then you can get hired back. So that's another thing you need to really think about. Because Power BI, as you know, probably is not like Excel. I can't just hand you a file, or I shouldn't say I can't just hand you a file. I can just hand you a file, but that's going to significantly hamper what I can do to help you after my credentials expire. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Just check any questions, any comments. I know that these might seem trivial, but man, oh man, I've seen them put the brakes on big projects when these things happen. So nail them down, make sure you understand them. And if you are working with people who are internal and credentials for access are not an issue, make sure that you ask those questions about the data source, because those are often governed by, whoever controls the data source, and there may be different rules for that. All right, Adriano, any questions showing up yet? Any comments? Okay, I'm gonna assume. Okay, good. I'm gonna assume that silence is golden and means that everything is good. All right, let's talk about the data. Okay, so the first thing I really want you to think about is, does the internal team, whether you are hiring somebody externally or you're going to bring somebody in from another team, or you're going to hire somebody from within, you're going to ask somebody from within your own team to create this report, does the internal team currently have access to and understand the data? That is a huge issue, and here's why. Because if they don't know what the fields are called that they are interested in, if they don't know what data is being tracked, if they don't know, some of the specifics of what's in the system, it's going to be very hard for them to give you anything but a general description of what they want. It's not a showstopper, but what you will need to do is plan in time to make sure that everybody understands what's in the data source. Now, if it's an Excel file, that's not too big of a deal. But if you're pulling data, let's say out of a SQL database, or you're pulling data out of Dynamics, and you don't know how it's stored, you've only ever had reports given to you that may have been massaged, then you may not know what a particular field is called, and so on. So it's really important to know when you start if they currently have access to and understand the data that they want. If they don't, or even if they do, who's going to orient the external party to the data? So when I say that, I mean, who is going to walk the, either the contractor that you hire or the other person in the team or whoever it's going to be, who's going to orient them to the data? And that's a really important step, because you'll lose a lot of time if the contractor or the internal employee has to sit and try to figure out, what is this field? What is this field? I am not exaggerating when I tell you that I have had to go into source data and add up columns that had numbers in them. So, they have one column has the number one column has the number 2, and then there's another column that has 3. And I have to parse together that 3, the data in column that has the value 3, is composed of the columns that have 1 and 2 in them. So again, that can take a long time. That's not a very efficient way to do it. So it is really good if you have someone who can orient to the data. Will the external party or the internal party have access to the data SME, subject matter expert? That's an important question, because if there is a subject matter expert, but they are not available, or they're not on board with this, or they're in another time zone, a dramatically different time zone, that can pose real problems on impositions on your timeline moving ahead really fast, or not really fast, but at a pace that you're comfortable with. It can result in a lot of delays. So it's understanding who the SME is, and are they able. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, yep. Hello. Oh, okay. Well, I haven't gotten to that yet, I don't believe, but I will definitely get to that. I'm going to talk about the data dictionary in a minute. Okay. All right. So the next thing, thank you, Chewy, is exactly that. One of the things that you should ask or be aware of is there a schema and or a data dictionary available to share? That is something that, if there is such a document, you can provide that with to the person who's going to create the Power BI report, even before they have their credentials, maybe while you're waiting. The difference in my mind between a schema and a data dictionary is a schema will tell you what the fields are and what tables they're in, and what format they're in, and that kind of thing. A data dictionary will explain what the field means. Just because I can see that a field exists and it's an alphanumeric, and it is, let's say, a multiple choice field, does not mean that I understand what the field is. So ideally, you have a data dictionary to share, and you can share that with your contractor or with the person internally who's going to develop the Power BI report. Otherwise, there's a lot of guessing sometimes. Okay. This is fairly straightforward. This just means, the more documentation, the more access to the data SME, the more familiarity with the source data, the faster your project will go. And obviously the corollary is, if there's no documentation and or limited or no access to the data SME, or no previous access to the source data, it's just going to take longer, and you have to factor that in to the equation as you build your timelines. Okay, any questions on that? Adriano, I'm going to assume you're going to go ahead and interrupt me if there are questions, right? Okay, okay, I'll keep, okay, excellent. You know what? Thank you for that because you're absolutely right. I did not even think about that. And I don't know why I didn't think about it because that's huge. So thank you for jumping in. That's exactly the kind of collaboration that I want for this talk. So, yeah, I'll give you an example for the why today. I mean, literally today, I'm working with this large corporation and we're working on a particular page and we're trying to figure out, we've got a visual that's not working, they don't like it, and I'm trying to talk to another freelancer to say, okay, well, what do you think they're looking for? What is the key metric? What's the strategic metric here? So absolutely, thank you for interjecting that. So you're right, I should have put that on my slide. So understanding the why, in fact, I'll probably go back and add that later on. Alrighty, excellent contributions, guys. Oh wait, wasn't there another question? There was two, wasn't there? In Power, I wonder if you mean, Victor, in the Power BI world or in this presentation. I'm not quite sure. Okay. Oh, that great. So come back to me when he does, because I think data dictionary is so critical. I cannot tell you how hard it is to guess. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going with this, and meanwhile, you guys keep your comments coming. One thing I want you to be aware of, you need to find out if you're hiring someone external. This isn't as true of someone internal, but if you're hiring someone external, you need to be clear as to whether they are working on your project on a dedicated basis. And I'll give you an example from my own experience. I developed this report for a very large corporation, and they, of course, are used to being able to pick up the phone and say, "Oh, help! I need your help right now." Well, I also train. I do Power BI training, among other things. So I'm not available at the drop of a hat. So I think it's one of those things that you have to be really clear up front. And I was not really clear up front, and I regretted it. So being clear about, what is the turnaround when I call you with a question, what can I expect? And don't assume that your external party is, don't assume or behave like your external party is on a retainer. Because, if you put them on retainer, then yeah, they'll be available to you at any moment. But other than that, they're probably not. They're probably juggling. And what that means in terms of your timeline is they could be working on something else, and you may end up with gaps between things that happen. The other place you'll see this show up is when employees or critical people that they need to get in touch with are not available. Uh, then what'll happen is you'll have these long delays, the employee's not available, then maybe the contractor's not available, and so on. So a lot of this has nothing to do with Power BI per se, but I have found it to be an issue, particularly because in the early stages of a Power BI report, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of question and answer going on. I will say one more thing, just from my experience of running projects in large corporations, is I pretty much would say between Thanksgiving and January 1st, I wouldn't expect much work to be done. Now, I know some work gets done, but to be honest, I just usually said, oh, we'll get about half of what we normally get done during that time period. So again, just my own personal experience on that. All right, Adriano, any comments or questions on that? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm assuming that what Victor means is that he doesn't hear the term data dictionary being as um, common or as well widely accepted as it is in as it is in ITIL. And I agree. I mean, I really feel like a data dictionary is really a must-have for people. That people think that the schema is enough, but it's not enough. Not you're going to make people guess as to the names of fields and so on. Okay. Yes. I don't know who said that, but yes, you are spot on, whoever that was, because that has been my experience, is that when people come to me and say they want a Power BI report, I will usually send them back a long list of questions, and they don't even understand why I'm asking all those questions, because in their mind they're still thinking of it as Excel. So I 100% agree with that statement. This this slide I just kind of wanted to put in here because it's been my experience. It may or may not pertain, but you need to decide how you're going to communicate. And I know this sounds really silly, but it's been a problem for me. What'll happen is people will think, oh, you know what? I'll just add you to our Teams instance. Well, first of all, they use my email address, which actually is not an email address, it's an alias. It's not my real email address. So what happens is they add that alias to Teams, Teams doesn't recognize it. So then, because I can't authenticate, so then I have to go back and say, no, 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 no. You have to use this email address, my real email address, in order to add me to Teams. The other thing about it is I belong to a lot of Teams instances, and so do a lot of freelancers. So it's hard for me to be in and out of, so what I have to do is log out and log back in, log out and log back in if I want to use the Teams desktop. So I tend to just say, please communicate with me via email. And it seems very old school, but I get it. It's reliable, it's timely, and it works. So just think about how you're going to communicate and make that decision. Don't assume that even though Teams is a really, really, really great product, and I do think it is a great product, that it's the perfect situation for someone who is freelance, because it isn't necessarily. Okay, next one. And this is just me. This is my personal beef. Okay, you all ready for my personal beef? Um, don't make someone external call out somebody internal. So let's say that I'm trying to make an appointment with somebody internal and they won't return my emails, they won't return my phone calls, that kind of thing. Don't put it on me as the external provider. um, Build in some kind of mechanism whereby you can kind of say, okay, so, you were supposed to have a meeting with Victor last week. Were you able to have it? And then I can say, oh no, Victor was busy. I don't have to come to you and say, like tattletale out of school. So again, just build that in. That will make any external party's life a lot easier, because believe me, we're very uncomfortable saying, so and so doesn't return my phone calls. It makes us look stupid, and we never win from that kind of conversation. So just a thought. Okay, let's talk about licensing. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about licensing internally. So I'm not talking about your external party here. I'm talking about internally. It's important to think about the licensing inside your organization. Now, I know we all work on Power BI Pro. We get it. We know that you have to be licensed with at least E3 and Pro or E5 to have access to, being able to build reports, be a member of a workspace, that kind of thing. Most business users are not aware of that. I will tell you, I cannot tell you the number of times I've gone into organizations and they're like, oh yeah, we're only going to have licenses for like 2 people. And like the other 2,000 are going to just, we're just going to send them the PBIX file. There's a lot of misunderstanding around this. And I think it's really important. It's one of the first questions I ask is, How are you guys licensed? Who has what licenses? Now, of course, we know that if you're premium, then it doesn't matter because you have anybody can view a report. But remember, even in premium, to create a report, you have to have a minimum of a pro license. Now, of course, we've got premium per user coming, and I really don't know what that all entails yet. So I just kind of put a placeholder in here for that. But just remember that people, if you are asking someone to build a Power BI report and then expecting them to send it around as a PBIX file, yeah, that's probably not going to work. So I usually will ask those questions right out of the gate and get them prepped that that's something internally that they need to do. Now,
Hi,
let's talk about, oops, go
hi,
ahead.
Jessica. We have a question here
Yeah.
from Victor. He wants
Oh,
to
excellent.
know, is this part of Microsoft 365? Apparently, Microsoft made some changes recently.
Well, as far as I know, now Microsoft changes every day. So, you know, I haven't checked in the last 20 minutes. So, as far as I know, if you are in Office 365, now this is business. There's a whole nother SKU for government and there's a whole nother SKU for academic. But I usually talk about business just because that's what I know. E3, if you have, most users will have E3. And if they have E3, they have to add Pro onto the E3 license. E3 does not give you Power BI Pro, does not give you a Power BI license out of the box. E5 does give you a Power BI license out of the box, but it is also a much more expensive license. So I believe that the same is true in the academic, which are the A SKUs, and the same is true in the government SKUs. I'm not going to swear to it, and I'm not a licensing expert. So, but that's my understanding. Adriano, do you have any different understanding?
As far as licensing, I have not been following up on the latest changes, so I do not really have anything valuable to add at this point.
Okay, well, if
Uh,
anybody on the call does, feel free to put it in the chat because you
yeah,
know they're always changing stuff. So when I first got into this and I started training, I felt really uncomfortable when I didn't, you know, when someone would say, well, I think that's changed. And then I'd feel really bad. And now I'm like, yeah, okay, what is it now? So just tell me now, because of course it's changed. So if you've got other newer information, please let me, please tell all of us. But I will say, regardless of what changes they've made, you do still need a license. There is no free lunch with Power BI. And that goes for the Teams integration too, which I'll get to in a second. So that goes for the Teams integration as well.
just one point of clarification here too is that as Chewy Varela outlined, the Microsoft E3 and Power BI Pro are separate licenses.
Yes,
You
he's
know,
absolutely right. They are, you're right. You're absolutely right,
yes.
Chewy. And I tend to forget about the Pro being a standalone. So thank you for that. I
And
guess I just, go
and
ahead.
and E5 does include Power BI Pro.
Yes. Yes, E5 has Power BI baked in. It's just baked in along with all kinds of other goodies. But you're absolutely right, Chewy. So thanks for jumping in on that one. Pro is a different license, which you could have as a standalone, which I never ever encounter, so I never ever think about it. So thank you for jumping in.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
also a question from Osi Preciosa, I believe is the correct statement. What about Power BI Embedded? My understanding is also a separate license there.
ooh, that's
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
That I do not know much about. If anybody on the call can jump in and help me, I'd be grateful. Embedded is this whole thing with developers, and yeah, I'm gonna plead ignorance on this one. If anybody else can jump in and comment, I'd be super grateful on that one.
Yeah, and there's also a comment from Christine Gillook. Yes, that is also my understanding, Christine, that one of the changes to premium has to do with that individual user licensing option. I think you wrote user licensing option. Yeah, it's I'm not in the details of this. Do you have any comments there, Jessica?
So I think what you're asking, Christine, is did they change premium so that you don't need a pro license to create reports? I wonder if that's what you're asking.
No, is that the Power BI Premium now? There is a new offer. If I'm not mistaken, feel free to correct me here, folks. That on the Power BI Premium, there is a new offer for a per user licensing option.
Yes,
I
absolutely. Yes. That's the premium per user that I've got down there at the bottom. That's in preview. They haven't even released the pricing, but you're absolutely right. That is a brand new offering they just came out with. But how is it going to work, and how would that affect you working with someone external? I don't know. But yes, you're absolutely right. That is new. Watch for that to come out sometime in November, I believe, is what they're saying now.
Yeah, and there's great feedback here from the people on the channel talking about Note E3, talking about E3 and Pro does not allow the Excel user to use get data to access the Power BI service data set using Excel get data feature. And that's from Roger Lowe.
I
Yeah,
thought
and
that
it's
changed. I thought that changed.
yeah, I think there's the analyze. Yeah, he corrects later on. I was gonna say that too, but he also stated that there is the analyze in Excel option now, and I think that's
Yes.
yeah, that's the thing about licensing. It's
Yeah, right. And that's why I always want to say, your mileage may vary, so definitely talk to your IT department or your Microsoft people, because this information and a dime won't get you anywhere. So you do need to definitely talk to Microsoft if you want the real scoop on this. But yes, you're absolutely right. I think they did just make a change to the Excel. Honestly, I didn't pay that much attention to it. Apparently, I needed to, but yeah. Okay, let me keep moving because this is excellent dialogue. Now, so that was all just internal. Now let's talk about external. This is in the scenario where you're hiring somebody to do this. So the first thing you need to ask yourself is, where should the development take place? So let's refresh ourselves as far as what normally happens. Best practice is that you do your development in the Power BI desktop. So that's fine. But we all know desktop is free. So the developer you hire, the external party. I don't call myself a developer. I don't have those skills. But whoever you're hiring to create this Power BI report, they can have the Power BI desktop for free. That's not an issue. That's not your problem. You shouldn't need to worry about it. And you don't. The question becomes, do you need to provide a license? And the answer is yes, if you want them to be able to publish into a workspace in your environment. Then you will need to provide them, along with the access credentials, you'll need to provide them with a license, a pro license. Probably E3 and Pro is what you would go with. I doubt you'd go with E5 unless you needed them to do Power Platform stuff too. That's a different conversation. But what I have experienced is I use my own Power BI desktop to develop things, and I do have my own E5 Power BI license, but that does not give me access to their environment and their workspaces. So to get into and be able to publish a workspace inside your organization, you will have to provide the license. So that is something that you need to think about. What I've had to do in the past is hand the PBIX file off to someone internal, train them on how to publish it, and then let them publish it. And it seems minor, but don't forget to align on the desktop version that they're going to use. Most people that I know who do this freelance keep their Power BI desktop up to date. Because we're always being asked about the latest features. That means that I have every bell, every whistle, and I check all the preview boxes. But inside of an organization, you may not be running at that level. So that may be something that you need to think about, and you need to make sure you've standardized on what version of the desktop they're using and what version you guys are using, and what preview features you're allowing. Because you definitely don't want somebody to develop a report based on a preview feature that they've checked, but that you haven't checked. All right, I'm gonna stop there. Any questions on this? Any questions on this? Yep. Okay. The other comment I'll make really quickly is make sure that you're also aligning on external tools, and I'll talk about that a little later as well. But that's the newest thing that they added in July. That's a big upgrade. And if you're not using external tools, you want to be really careful as to what the person who's creating the report is relying on. Now, I can't think of an example where it would really matter. But again, it's just something to think about. That's all. It's just something to think about. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. You guys keep your comments going. All right, let's talk about that data model for a second. Now, there are lots of ways to build a data model, and some are more elegant than others. Have you ever seen a data model that looks like a tangle of spaghetti? Well, I have, because I've built them. So they're not a pretty sight. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's easier to build an ugly but functional data model than take the time to build a really elegant model. So some things you want to think about. Do you want to reuse the data model in other reports? You know, we can do that now. So the question is, if you're paying someone to do this to begin with, are you going to create a situation where you may actually want to use this later on for other reports? That opens up all kinds of other questions, but at least ask yourself that question right now: is there the potential to build once, use many? If so, do you have standards for your data models? So do you require that it be a star schema, or will you tolerate a modified snowflake? How about import and direct query? Do you have requirements on those? Now, I know that, import is, generally speaking, better from a database owner's perspective, because you're not constantly going back and pinging the database. But you want to make sure that you're very clear as to the guidance that you give somebody about, yes, you are to import these. And you could, if you wanted to, do a direct query on these. Now, I personally don't do anything that direct queries. So again, you give the guidance that you feel is appropriate. But again, just make sure that you've thought that through, and that if you've got standards, that you communicate those. Oh, that one, okay, we already did that one. And are you going to audit it for best practices? So are you going to be looking at it and deciding, you know what, you used all kinds of calculated columns here. I'd really prefer that it's going to be more efficient if you use measures. Again, this is a very gray area, but it is worth it to think about what your expectations are. Otherwise, the person you hand this off to is just going to do what they know how to do, what they're good at, what they're fast at. And it may not be what you're expecting, or it may not be everything that you're expecting. So again, it's useful to think these things through ahead of time. By the way, you may want to put it into your process that you audit anything that someone builds for you with that new tool. It's Tabular Editor, right? That has the ability to check it, to check the report. Does anybody remember what I'm talking about? I've forgotten what it's called. It's not best practice, I don't think, but it's an amazing tool. So if anybody remembers that, pop it into the chat there. That might be something you want to include before you accept delivery of a report, because it analyzes the report for efficiencies and so on. And I think it's Tabular Editor that does that. Okay, in the report view, so you know where you look at the model, Do you want the view to be segmented so it's easier to read the pieces that connect to each other, especially with a big model? That's something that you probably want to think about and put into your specifications if you do want that. Do you want the data model properties documented? So again, in the report view, there is a place where you can document properties. It's also connects with the Power Query editor where you can put properties in a query. So you could add it either place. But do you want and or expect the person, whoever it is, internal or external, to be providing some documentation about what each query is, where did it come from, that kind of thing. If so, you probably want to say it right out at the beginning because that will help people, build that into the process as they go along. And also, to take advantage of natural language queries, do you want synonyms to be added? You can add those right in the report view. It's probably easiest to build them as you go along, but you may decide that you don't want, that only internal people really will know the synonyms that are necessary. So, but just think about it. If it's something that hey, let's just build it as we go, that means that when the report's done, you can actually use natural language. It'll be ready to go for natural language querying without too much more work. Okay, I'm going to stop there, Adriano. Questions, comments?
There's a comment here from Chuy Varela where he said, there's a comment, of course, even internally with our own coworker, it is hard to kind of implement standards, I believe is what he means, let alone to pass those standards along to consultants. So kind of the challenges there, and I think it opens to the conversation of how does one implement, how can I say, the standards into the workplace is one, and then if they do some quote unquote would be called a kind of what do you call, kind of code validation when somebody comes afterwards and review.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Chewy. It does put you in an awkward position. I don't think as much for an external person because, after all, you're hiring that person. So you could impose them on that person. And actually, I would argue that giving them guidelines will make it easier for them. However, you're absolutely right about internal. That is a very difficult thing. And what I will say is I'm old enough to remember when desktop publishing first came about. Some of you probably don't remember that. But anyway, there was a time in the mid 80s, I guess, when everybody was creating documents and everybody was using every font under the sun, and people got a hold of files that had logos, and they started misusing company logos and so on and so forth. And what happened was this thing called a standards manual evolved so people were told, no, you cannot take our logo and distort it and put it in the middle of the page, or you cannot use old English, serif font in a business letter, that kind of thing. So I think what I see happening over time is that more and more these will evolve, because people will say, wait a minute, why is this data model got this and this data model has that? We need to streamline these. So totally agree with your observation, Chewy. But I think it's coming, and I don't think there's any harm. Oh,
Sorry,
that's interesting.
that's my phone.
Is
It's
that
on the
your phone?
table. Yeah, that's my phone on
I
the table.
was like,
Sorry.
what? Is there a horn there? So yeah, really, really good point about standards. That's why I put it as a question. Do you have standards for your data model? Because you may not, but I don't think that means that we shouldn't. But I do agree it's a journey.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Dax.
Just a
Oops.
2 cents
Yeah.
here, real quick. I
Yes, please.
feel that, I can say that principally for outside resources, the matter always generally becomes to how much time does one will be given to establish those, and and to adapt and or integrate and discuss.
True. But my point on that one is that I think if you tell me, for example, look, we really want all of our data models to use the star schema. I'm going to know that in advance, and so I'm going to have that in mind as I start building. So again, that's a pretty simplistic example, but agreed that this is a conversation that is evolutionary. It's not here today, but it is something to think about, because sooner or later, you will have to decode the data model that they built. So you want to make sure that it at least, has some fundamentals that you can sign off on.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's go to DAX really quickly. So what level of complexity do you want and or expect for the DAX in the report? Now, for example, we all know that calculated columns are generally not the preferred solution. Generally, we all know that generally measures are a preferred solution to things. However, do you want to factor in the fact that your users are probably used to Excel, and calculated columns look the most like Excel? So, and sometimes they do not add a lot of overhead, especially if there's low cardinality. So maybe sometimes a calculated column is a good thing. So again, think about, how much DAX you want in the report, and how much you want it to rely on complex DAX. Because if they build it with complex DAX, somebody internal will have to know how to alter it if needed. And DAX programming is a skill set. Let me tell you, I'm trying to learn it. It's a skill set. So it's just something to consider. There's no right or wrong. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying keep that in mind. Do you have a taxonomy for measure names? I know that sounds really stupid, but today I was working with somebody and we were trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to name this measure so that everybody knows what it does and why it's there. I mean, there was a whole thought process that had to go into that. So again, if you've got some kind of systemic thought about names, tell somebody or tell the internal person or document them somehow in advance. If the calculation can be done in M, do you want it done over in the Power Query editor? There are some things you can't do over there. There are some things you could do either in M or in DAX. Do you have a preference? Again, it just means that if stuff is done in M, people need to know how to read M and at least be able to go in and alter M. They may not need to know how to write it, but they need to know how to alter it and edit it if stuff is done over in M. And how readable do you want the measures to be? I mean, I guess my comment here is, remember that business users will be looking at these measures. They'll click on a measure and they need to be able to understand, at least in theory, what the measure is doing. So it just is something to think about in terms of, is one of your goals more readability for your measures, or do you not care? Maybe they're never going to see the PBIX report. So again, maybe they're only going to see it in the service. And also, do you want a performance test completed on the DAX measures prior to report delivery? So that is something that you can ask for. Remember, you can do that in DAX Studio. So you could say, hey, I want to see, I want you to run a performance test on this so that I can see, each measure and how they perform. So again, that's just a, do you want to include that in your specifications? Any questions on that, Adriano? Oh, yeah. Any questions on that one? Okay.
There's just a question that I didn't reach before, and kind of a question / comment from Roger Lowe covering data. Data modeling is a whole day discussion, and then he talks about allow composite model or allow aggregation, allow time coverage of model. Those are a lot of topics that discussed it in modeling, and he understands it's hard to cover in 15 minutes.
Yeah, you know what? Those are definitely things I would add to this slide. If I was in the process of editing it and you said, "Oh, you forgot about this," absolutely, you're right. I would say something about composite models. I would, if you have a position on them. I would say something about aggregations if you have a position on them. So you're spot on with that one. Quite frankly, didn't even occur to me. So absolutely. And you're right. The whys and wherefores of a good data model, that is, I would argue it's not a one-day discussion. It's probably a one-year discussion. But you probably have some preferences and you probably have some best practices in your organization. So whatever they are, if they're there, document them and hand them over to the external provider or even to the internal person. So excellent. Thank you for that, because that was a great addition. Okay, I'll keep moving. Slicer visuals versus filter paint. I know you're going, are you serious? Are you serious? But I have found that what happens is I built this beautiful report. Well, okay, I thought it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful report. I built this report and I built it so that it had slicers. Now I know that if you put things on a filter pane and you set the filters to be the default. So let's say you're usually filtering on the US. You have other countries in the list, but most of the time you're searching in the US, so you're going to filter on the US. And you close the filter pane. You can improve the performance of that page dramatically. So the question is, do you put it in a filter pane or do you put it on a slicer? Because users understand slicers. But do you have a performance problem? If you have a performance problem, you could move it to the filter pane and set it to the default and then close the filter pane. And if 99 of the users out of 100 are searching on that default, you've improved the experience for 99 users. The other thing I found is I put stuff in slicers and then they started using the filter pane. So I do think this is something that there's no right or wrong way. It's just a back and forth. It's a seesaw of things. But I put this in here today because I thought it was really amusing that I was like, okay, you guys, do you want this on a slicer or do you want it on the filter pane? Could you just tell me? So again, that was my experience and I wanted to put it in here for that. Alrighty, I'm going to keep moving. And I want to talk about workspaces. Now, this ties back to that licensing issue. So if you expect the external party to be able to publish, if that's part of the deliverables, they're going to have access to your environment and they have to be a member of a workspace with publishing rights. So the first question is, where will the finished report be published? I think of this as a super easy question, but it turns out that it's not. A lot of questions have to be addressed about where does it live, whose workspace, and so on and so forth. So again, it is important to have that. They don't have to answer it at the beginning of the project, but they do have to be working on an answer while the report is being developed. Who will be responsible for publishing the reports? So if it's not the person who's developing it, the external party, meaning you're not licensed internally, that external person is not licensed internally, then they will have to hand off that PBIX report to somebody. And that person has to be licensed to publish it. Okay. And we'll also talk about training in a minute, but again, you need to think through who's going to be responsible for that once the external party hands it over, because there does need to be somebody responsible for it. Again, is there a workspace already designated? That ties back to that first question. Talking to whoever owns the workspace, you need to make sure that they believe that that is the right place to put it. I've been amazed by what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not going to use the word confusion. That's not the right word. Just workspaces aren't integrated into the way we think yet. I don't believe. So I think there's always a lot of confusion about, well, wait, why do I have to decide where this goes? and that kind of thing. So again, I think the question of workspaces needs to be addressed early. It doesn't have to be decided early, but it needs to be in the planning. And you need to think about the naming taxonomy. So what is the name of the report going to be? Do they have a standard for that? If you don't have a standard for that, I do highly recommend you develop a standard for that. Because otherwise report names can be all over the board and it can be very confusing. Also, how are you going to handle version control? So I know there is version control now in workspaces, but what I still see is people publishing version 14, version 15, version 16. So there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to decide how you're going to handle version control. All right, I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions or comments. No worries. While we're waiting, the other comment I'll make about this is, you know, now you can create these workspaces where you can publish the data model, just the data model, and then people can connect to that data model, or they can copy the report. So there's a lot of flexibility here, which means there's a lot more choices. So it's just, again, it's something that needs to be put on the agenda.
Yeah, there's just a comment here from Roger Lowe, but he refers to the previous talk where the previous slide that talks about helps users with easily understand what dimensions and attributes are filtered. It's probably the talk about slicers and filter pane.
Yeah, so I'm assuming, Roger, you mean that putting them in a slicer, or at least that's what I think. If you put the dimensions in the slicer, yeah, I agree. It's a much better user experience. So I do think that. I do think you take a performance hit for that choice. So there is no right or wrong there. But yes, that was my experience. I found that I loaded up my report with slicers and then they immediately started using the filter pane. So, you know, who can say? So, all right, let's keep going. All right, so we're still on workspaces. The next question is, think about, do you expect the external contractor or even the internal person to create dashboards? What I find is people tend to use the term report and dashboard interchangeably, but we all know that's not the case. So the question is, when someone says, I need a dashboard, well, that's a different discussion from I need a report. So if the external contractor is going to create a dashboard, a true dashboard, they have to have that license so that they can be a member of the workspace. So again, just a licensing consideration there. The other thing is, if you do have the external party create a dashboard that has streaming data in it, then they have to have access, make sure they have access to that streaming data source. So again, same issue is you've got to have access to the data source. And, okay, we already talked about the level. Oh, well, we didn't really talk about this. So think about what level of membership you're going to give to that external party in the workspace. Are they only going to be able to publish their own report? What are they going to be able to do there? So again, it's something, they can't just be a reader. I forget what the lowest level is. I think it's reader, but they can't just have the lowest level or they can't publish. So it's just one of those things you're going to want to think about and make sure that you've considered and you've talked to the workspace owner about what the membership level will be. And remember, all workspace members will need credentials to the data source. This was a gotcha that I did not anticipate. I assumed, we know what happens when you use that word. I assumed, bad me, that that the consumers of the report I was building had access to the source data. They didn't. So when we got to the end of the project and I'm like, okay, here you go. They're all like, well, our visuals are broken. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, so we untangled it and they did not have access to that source data. I did, but they didn't. So again, they have to have that for that report to work. And I know it seems like a really obvious thing, but when you get going, you get busy, it's not an obvious thing. Not really. I would consider apps and the ability to publish an app and all that kind of stuff. That would be along the same lines as workspaces. So for me, it would be an extension of the conversation about workspaces. I would doubt. So the person who can publish an app out of a workspace is it's the administrator, I think. I think it's the administrator. It's the highest level of permissioning in the workspace. So I would seriously doubt the external party would ever be given those credentials. So they wouldn't be in a position to either publish an app or decide what goes into the app. I wouldn't think. Of course, there's always a scenario that can come up, but again, apps are just going to be an extension of the workspace conversation, but I don't think they're going to be one that really pertains to working with either an internal or an external party on a specific report. But I'm happy to be proved wrong. So if you've got an instance or an example, please share it. Okay, I'm going to keep moving in the interest of time. The other thing I want to quickly talk about is, as you may have noticed in if you attended Ignite, Teams integration with Power BI was really pushed. Teams integration with Power Platform was really pushed. And so one of the things that I just want to mention here is, first of all, we all know this, but our business users don't. There is no free lunch. So if you want to publish a report into Teams, you still have to have a license for every single person. You have to have a Power BI Pro license or an E5 license, or the organization has to be on premium for everybody to be able to see that report in Teams. In the context of what we're talking about right here, right now, it's just you want to think about if you want the external person or the internal person to be able to publish it to Teams, they have to be a member of that team. So that seems like a no-brainer, but it's just, again, something that, you know, we tend to forget. Same thing with SharePoint. Power Platform is a whole nother conversation. Not even going to touch that right now. Okay. Any questions on anything? Adriano, are we good? Tell me where we are. Okay, I'm holding. Ooh, I don't know who brought that up, but good point. Yay, Roger. Oh man, Roger, you're hitting the high notes tonight. Oh, God, Adriana, you didn't tell me you invited all the smart kids to this. Anyway, yes, good point. I didn't even think about mobile reports. Excellent point. That would probably be a slide in and of itself. Didn't even think about it. Yes, you would probably have to put that in there, and you'd have to specify, you know, kind of the same types of things. Roger, you are on your game tonight, mate. So yes, you would have to include that, and you'd have to put specifications. I've never done a mobile report, to be honest, so I can't say what that might look like per se, but anyway, ooh, that was a good one. Oh, I do not know that. Gen 2. I feel like I was attending a presentation about Azure Data Lake Gen 2, but I don't think that's what Roger's talking about. So let me keep going before I get myself all messed up on something I don't know. So, okay. Side note, this is just a side note, but it's an important side note. Yes, that's so true. Yes, it is. It is. It really is. I just want to put a side note in here. You probably do not have any control over what machines you get. You definitely don't have any control over external parties, but I will tell you, I'm working with a freelancer now who it's killing him because he has He does not have a 64. Oh, I forgot to put that in here. He does not have a 64-bit machine. He has an older processor, and I do not think he has over 16, whatever it is, 16 meg of RAM. I think that's it. Anyway, his machine crashes all the time. So this is just a side note. We don't all get to control this, but yeah, it drives him nuts, and he's just been thrown into this. So it's just something to consider anyway. So, all right, I'm going to keep moving here. All right. So these are the internal team. So we're not talking about the external team now. We're talking about the internal team. And they do need training. Unless they're already fully integrated in Power BI, they know how to do it, they know how to use it, in which case forget all about all of this stuff that I'm going to say to you. But if this is the new foray and someone has hired somebody external because they don't have the expertise in-house, you cannot overlook the training that's needed internally. So for a report author or editor, they do need to be fluent with the Power BI desktop. They need to know how to go in and make changes into that PBIX file that you send. They need to be able to change the data source connections, because that's probably the first thing they're going to have to do when someone hands it off to them. They need to know how to publish reports, set permissions, and so on. They need to know how to create workspaces and apps if it's required. So generally speaking, they need to be pretty fluent in Power BI. Maybe they don't need to know how to write DAX and all of that, but they need to be pretty capable. Your consumer needs to really know about the Power BI service, so they need to know how to get to navigate the service, find their workspaces, their reports, their dashboards, and so on. They need to be able to create dashboards. They need to know how to use apps, and they need to know how to share reports with other workspaces. So again, there is training that's needed. If you're going to expect the external party to do it, then that needs to be a separate line item, because that is a separate skill set. And it's rare that you'll find somebody who's a developer who's also a really good trainer. And I would say the opposite is also true. It's rare to find a good trainer who's also a really good developer. Those are not skill sets that usually go hand in hand. And I will say I'm a good example. I'm a much better trainer than I am developer. So in fact, I am like, I don't think I want to do this report development much. But anyway, all right, questions on that? Oh, what? Oh, my hip team, yes. Yeah, my old silver hair, that's me. And you're a young guy, yep. I know. Well, you know what? PowerPoint has these great new, you know how PowerPoint has icons? They now have all kinds of things in there. I encourage you to go into PowerPoint. And they have these people, these real people that obviously have agreed to be photographed and have agreed to use their image and so on. So it's kind of cool. So I encourage you to go look at that in PowerPoint. Okay, now, yeah. Ooh, damn. Ooh, that's a bad word. Sorry about that. Oh, darn, Roger. Whoa. Yeah, gateways. Yes, thank you. You do need to understand the concept of gateways. Once again, something that if I was editing this deck right now, I would add it. So thank you for that. Thank you for that add, because I've never used them. I've never had to use them. Everything that I've ever used was in the cloud already. But you're absolutely right. It could be, and I would say that ties back into the data source, and all the credentials and all the skills to get to the data source. So thank you for that. That's a good add.
Yeah, there's
Everything's been.
a
Go
comment
ahead.
too from Chewy saying having the same quote unquote language on Power BI terms is also important. Yes, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah,
Damn, we all need to
yeah.
take this on a road show, folks. We all need to go on a road show. We need to go in and just all of us together do this.
And
All right.
and the OC Preciosa has what is the training for IT teams? It's a question there.
Oh, wow. Another really good one. Okay, so I would say if I added a third box on here, the IT teams would really be about Power BI admin and all around, I would say really all around Power BI admin. It might be around workspaces to some extent, but I think the idea of Power BI, and I'm happy for somebody to push back on this, but I think the idea of Power BI is to put the power in the hands of the users. So when I think of the IT staff, I tend to think of Power BI admin stuff. But I'm happy for people to disagree or add comments. So excellent comment there, OC. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm watching our clock here, and I've got such juicy things coming up you're not even going to believe. So hold on a second. So these are some suggested checkpoints. I'm going to run through them really fast because, again, the deck will be available. But this is just kind of a thought of how to lay out the project timeline. So the first one would be that the person has all the credentials acquired and access to the data is obtained. And I will tell you that I will not, from now on, if I do another report for anybody, I will tell them the clock does not start until this step is completed. Because what I found, and I don't know if you guys follow American football, but you know what I found was waiting for this stuff to be done, it was eating up the clock for me. And so it just meant that I was rushing at the end. So that to me, as an external party, is something I would say, I'm not even going to start the clock until this process is complete. So then, you know, making sure the next step, in my opinion, would be looking at the data schema and the dictionary or the dictionary if it's available, making sure that the team has reviewed it and the external parties reviewed it. This seems really obvious, but relevant tables and fields identified. A lot of databases have a lot of fields that are not, do not pertain to what we are interested in. So that's an important step. This one ties back to something I think Chewy, you said, I can't remember who said it, but identifying the strategic, or maybe it was Christine's, the strategic insights, making sure that you understand what questions they're trying to answer. Talking about the organization of the report. Do they want to have a lot of pages? How do they want to break up those pages? The data ETL completed and documented. Now, I will say that this is an iterative process in my experience. You do the ETL, and then you have to come back and do some more, and then you have to come back and do some more. But you do a big portion of it, you know, kind of right up front. And so that is a step in the process. Then you do a draft, and maybe in the interim you want to do a checkpoint for each page. I don't know, you know, again, that depends on how you want to deliver the work product. And I would argue that you need to publish the draft into a workspace. Maybe it's a, you know, sandbox workspace where the team can push and pull and poke and prod. Because it's only once they use it, in my experience, that they go, no, this is not right. Something's not right here. Once they've done that, they review it in the workspace, and then you have a comment period. So my thought on that is that's when you could be doing the training, is while they're poking and prodding and commenting. Then you go back and you make the changes as much as you can. And then you do another draft and you publish it. And there's another comment period. And you may do more training during that time frame, because by that point, hopefully they realize, oh, you know what, we don't know how to do this. How do we do this? Or someone does some training. Maybe it's not you. And then you do your final draft. So what I have found is that they don't know what they don't know until they've gotten the report in their hands and they go, no, this is not right. Fix this. No, this doesn't make sense. No, we hate this visual. Take this out. That kind of thing. So these are just some suggested checkpoints. They're not obviously hard and fast. They're not in stone. They're just been my experience. And And now let's go to the don't forget about. So that'll be my last slide. So let me check to see if there's any questions before that.
All right, folks, any questions there? Anybody? I know that we have a comment here from Victor. He was talking about number 6.
Oh, yep, number 6, yep.
He said that number 6, which is the data ETL completed and documented. He said it's missing in Azure Data Factory here, that item. And he also said that you are providing a task that is so needed in the data factory. Hey, you know, I believe they have that ideas page that add those great
Well,
features to Azure Data Factory there.
Yeah, I will say that Azure Data Factory is on my list of things to learn because I think it's the next evolution. So I will be very interested. Sounds like, was that Victor? Victor knows more about it, but I am definitely, that's kind of my next up thing that I want to master. Or I shouldn't say master. I don't think you ever master a Microsoft product. Keep learning on. Okay, I'm going to keep moving because I know we're almost done here.
Yeah,
So,
just real quick, there's also a
yep.
comment from Chewy saying, Jessica, this is a great presentation. Not all topics around Power BI are about technical stuff. The process around properly using Power BI is just as important as well.
Agreed. Because you know what happens, Chewy, I tell you, you've probably been there. They all want a Power BI report. And then you start asking all these questions and they're like, and you just know that you're going to run into problems. So that's kind of what motivated me to kind of put this together. So, okay, let me go through this last one. Like I'm saying, it's a catch-all, but it's got some real gotchas in here. So the first is accessibility. So accessibility means the ability for people who are differently abled to be able to read the report and experience the report. I have made a Power BI report accessible. It is horrendous in terms of the amount of time because every visual has to be altered. And sometimes in the visual, all of the little pieces in the visual have to be altered. So if you have a requirement that the Power BI report be accessible, fully accessible, you better be adding at least 50% more time for that. It is horrendous. So again, just my own experience, but something to consider. Branding and templates. So if you've got corporate branding or you have a Power BI template that has all that branding in it, great, you're almost all the way home. If you only have, let's say, your PowerPoint, most corporations have PowerPoint templates now, hand the external party the PowerPoint template that it has your corporate standards or your corporate brand colors and logo and all of that, and they can use that. In many cases, you can just use a PowerPoint slide as a background. So that at least is a place to start. But again, give them our corporate logo, your fonts, all that kind of stuff. Then they can build it from the ground up with everything rather than having to change it. The date table. Our friend, the date table. So ask about a date table. You definitely want to provide them with a date table if you have it already. That's the ideal scenario. If you don't, they should be asking you because they should build a date table and they should put in all of your unique requirements. Do you have a different fiscal year end? What's your quarters? What's your month end? All that kind of stuff. So don't forget the date table in the upfront discussion. And if you have one already, that's like amazing, and give them that. Custom visuals, are you going to allow them? I was going to put some in a report, and then I realized that there was a lot of chatter out there about they could. could present a security risk. So I opted for super safe and I didn't put any custom visuals in, but I encourage them to look at them and then, they can make the decision as to whether they want to incorporate a custom visual. But it is something you want to think about. Renaming fields. Okay, I know you're going, renaming fields. Well, you probably, in my opinion, you want to decide, are the fields going to get renamed in, let's say, the Power Query editor to be something more user-friendly? Or do you want to say, no, keep the fields the same name that they normally are in the database and only rename them for the visual? So again, there's no right or wrong. I'm just saying you want to think about that. I argue you do not want to give somebody free license to rename things. You want to have a say in how they handle that. Source data maintenance. Okay, you're going, what in the heck is this? So what I mean by this is, over in the Power Query editor, do you want them to be able, so when you bring into the Power Query editor, when you bring in data, do you want them to start to work on the query and edit the query, the native query, and make all those changes, and you just have one version of the query and it's fully it's edited? Or do you want them to have the source query in its raw format and they don't load that query doesn't get loaded, but it's always there to go back to? So there is no right or wrong here. I tend to prefer to have the source query and disable the load, just because it gives me a security blanket, but it doesn't mean that that's the right way. I think it just means I make my Power Query editor a little more complex than it has to be. So it's just, again, one of those things that you may have a view on, you may not have a view on. External tools, I mentioned those before. Are you gonna, do you want them to use them? Are you using them as an organization? So remember, external tools have to be imported. So just because Microsoft added those in July, that doesn't mean your people have them. So if they're going to use external tools in any way, shape, or form, you probably want to make sure you know that that's what they're going to do, if it's going to affect you down the line. Documentation. Be sure that you talk about how much documentation you expect. I personally like to document as I go, because then I can remember what I did and why I did it. And I like to do it in Power BI itself. So I like to do it either over in the Power Query editor. I like to rename my steps. I like to document the properties of the query. I like to put it over in the report model view as well. I'm pretty fanatic about trying. I don't do it all the time, but to put documentation as I go. But you want to specify what you want, and you do want documentation, in my opinion. And finally, figuring out updating reports. Who is going to update the reports? And are they going to be updated from the Power BI desktop, or are you going to allow people to update them in the service? I shouldn't say update. That's a bad term there. I should say edit. Because remember, if I edit a Power BI report in the service, a report now in the service, then if it gets published again from the desktop and that change wasn't in the desktop, it overwrites the change in the service that I made. So it's just something you're going to want to coordinate and make sure. That may not have anything to do with the external person, but it is something you want to think about as you think about, we've got this report, who's in charge of it, who keeps it as a living, breathing document. Whoa, okay, questions. All right, I'm done. And I know you guys have been awesome about asking questions, but feel free to ask any more or comment or whatever you want to do. And meanwhile, I'm going to capture some notes that you guys brought up to me, which I loved. Oh, you want me, my face, my pretty face? Oh, okay, well, wait, before we do that, then I have to say thank you. Look at this beautiful illustration that they've got in PowerPoint now. I'm telling you, go to PowerPoint, you guys, and check it out. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna stop sharing. And there I am. Do you see me?
Yes, I do. Hello, everybody. And thank you very much, Jessica, for such a great presentation, great insights on this presentation, touching some very key aspects of the Power BI implementation to identify, understand what challenges come, but also presenting solutions and workaround to those challenges there. And now let me take a look over here on questions here. And folks, please take the opportunity here, drop your question on the chat. If you're not, just log in, subscribe, and get it to ask questions right out. And don't forget to like and comment the presentation here. And comments.
You guys,
Go
you
ahead.
guys have been so awesome, and I am writing down. I am totally stealing with pride your comments that you've made. So totally.
All right, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So let me take a look over here, see what we have. There was a note here that I saw. A lot of Chewy Varela. You did great, Jessica. Thank you.
Oh, you're so
Yeah.
nice, Chewy. Thank you.
Victor, also Precious. They all love it. They really like it there.
Oh, you guys were the best. Swear to God. I mean, so you know what I love? I love when people just put their comments in and they, we have discussion because really that's what's so helpful to me. I mean, love it.
Absolutely. And Roger Lou also outlined an item here about it's important to brief the company if there is incremental refresh built in. And if yes, please remind the company that they cannot download the PBIX file from the service.
Woo, Roger, hitting it out of the park again. You can't see me writing, but I'm writing. Yep, you're absolutely right. I did not talk about that, and you're absolutely right.
And there is
Damn.
there's also a comment here by Chuy Varela, and he's talking about the date table is key, especially to be consistent on slices to use across the board.
Yep, that date table, man. I cannot tell you how many companies big companies, big, big companies. You ask them about a date table, they're like, huh? Cannot emphasize enough how right you are on that, Chewy. Cannot emphasize it enough.
And Roger also earlier he talked about signing off on Power BI alerts if they are created.
Ooh. Wow. Okay, that's totally new for me. Ooh. Okay, that was a really good one. Okay.
All right.
Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to send this presentation to Roger and let him do it because you guys are all the bomb.com. That's so awesome.
And there is also Victor here made a note. He's probably he's how can I say putting a good word for you to probably work with Microsoft at the Azure Data Factory program group. Maybe become a program manager there.
Well, you know what? I swear to God, Chewy and I, we're on a mission. Chewy and I are on a mission. We are going to learn Azure Data Factory because, yeah, we're just, it's the next coming thing. But, here's the truth about Microsoft. It's exhausting. I don't know if you guys want to Ignite, but after Ignite, I just wanted to cry. I was just like, just stop. Just stop. It's just so much. But you know what? We'll just keep on soldiering on. And one thing I do love is doing things like this because then you guys, we have conversation, we have dialogue. So I love it.
It's like eating an elephant. You know the deal, right? So
yeah, you got to eat it one bite at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the difference is, Adriano, with Microsoft's elephant, it keeps growing. So it's just like, after you've eaten half the elephant, you then come to find out that they've doubled the elephant. So, yes, but
I
yes, but
I understand. So how can I say? It becomes a group of them, not only one. You know.
yeah, right, exactly. All right, so who's up next month? I want to know who's up next month.
Yes. Let me just finish here, and I will get to that just a second here.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, Chewy said. Chewy likes Roger point there about report alerts, and Victor talks about data sources needed to be available before you start creating a Power BI report. Indeed, that's for sure.
Oh,
That's
yeah. No,
yeah,
that's why so Victor, I do not start my clock. I
yeah.
learned the hard way. I don't start my clock. I'm not, you know what? No. The calendar, the clock starts ticking when I have access to the data source and it's the data that I need. That's when we start. Because otherwise it's just, 3 weeks go by. Oh,
Yeah, indeed. Now, all right. Like again, folks, remember, like. Let's see some more likes here and drop some comments as well. I'm quite sure that Jessica and myself do greatly appreciate your feedback.
we
And
do.
so, Jessica, to address your question here, who is the next speaker? So it's, for Jessica and everyone, this is the South Florida Power BI user group. We are doing a worldwide series nowadays because, and we are very fortunate to be able to engage individuals from all over the world. So the next in about 2 weeks, which will be on Tuesday, October 27th, we will start a bit earlier at 4 p.m. And what we're going to be doing going to Europe, where we're going to have Lou Seegers from Brussels, Belgium, and he's going to be talking about 10 performance tips to speed up your Power BI reports.
Ooh, that's
So
going to be awesome.
absolutely. So he's inviting us to. He says, "All aboard the data train, choo choo! Turn on this Turn your slow stream locomotive into a streamlined high-speed train."
Oh, yeah. Nice. Sign me up for that, man, because, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and he's talking about some of the issues that many people may have where they arrive at work or nowadays start working, right? And the first thing they do, they open a Power BI and they go have some coffee while they're waiting for the report to render.
True that.
So that's what he's covering here, which will be, bringing 10 performance tips to speed up your Power BI reports. Got some comments here. Thank you, Rogelo, for attending here as well. Uh, yes, Victor, is worldwide. We have been able to bring speakers from, different continents.
So, Adriano, are we going to, like Pitbull, we're going to call you Mr. Worldwide now?
And
Mr. Worldwide.
there we go, at least virtually,
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? You can go to any user group now. I mean, that's what's so cool is that it's just, you can get, I mean, okay, sometimes you may have to stay up till the middle of the night or they may have to stay up late, but still, it's really, that part is good, I think.
Absolutely. Even earlier, I did a presentation to a group also in Europe, and they do, I think the Power BI Manchester, they do power lunch or lunch and learn, better said.
Yep.
And
Yep.
for them is, they're doing at noon, so it means we are 5 hours behind, it's like 7:30 in the morning.
Yep.
I'm having breakfast, everybody else having lunch.
Exactly. It's a global world, my friend, Mr. Worldwide.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, Roger and everybody do, I'll be posting out the presentation so it's available to everyone as well on YouTube. And if you're
Okay,
new
I'll
to
send it to
the
you right now.
yeah, and if you are new to the user group, just look through the description section of this video. You'll see how to join the South Florida Power BI, and we are on Meetup, or you can go to Meetup and type South Florida Power BI. And we also have the Microsoft Data and AI user group. We are, which is an organization as well that we are. Let me get it here real quick. That we will gonna have also an event next week. If I may do a quick plug-in, we're gonna have an event next week, and the topic will be Azure Synapse Analytics Overview of Data Lake, a data lake
Ooh,
warehouse, and we're gonna have
wait,
James.
hold on.
Yes.
When is that? When is that? Because that is right. That is on my hit list. When is that?
Wednesday, October 21st.
That's my birthday. Did you come up with that for my birthday?
Wow, there we go.
Perfect.
Happy early birthday there.
Yeah, no, that is my birthday. That's awesome. What
Wow.
time?
That will be at 6 p.m. So Wednesday,
Okay, I'll
October
put that on my
21st,
calendar.
6 p.m. That's Eastern, by the way. Yeah, you're in
Yep.
Eastern right now, so you're set.
Yeah. Okay, six. All right, I'm gonna definitely attend that because that's on my list. I'm trying to understand lakes and warehouses and all that stuff.
Yeah, and so he's
So,
gonna cover the new term, which is data lake house, which you know
oh, a lake
it's
house?
that is the hottest latest term right now, the data lake house. You know.
I did not know that. Oh my. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna be there. That's my birthday present to myself.
Oh yeah. So folks, remember, just come to Meetup and join the South Florida Power BI. If you're interested in the Azure Synapse Analytics Overview, a data lake house presentation by James Serra. Remember, just also go to Meetup and just search for Microsoft Data and AI South Florida. Just final check up here on the live chat. Oh, the web scraping. I will put it together. I did have some problem that on Preciosa. I will check on that. I will get this web scraping presentation that I did. I have to look it up and see to bring it up so I can polish and get that up. I need some time to put that together for sure. And hey, Roger said happy birthday, Jess.
Oh, thank you. Early, but
Early
yes,
birthday, yes. Remember, it's on
yes,
the 21st.
exactly. And I'm in Meetup right now looking for that. So what is it called again?
You just search for Microsoft Data and AI South Florida.
Okay, Microsoft Data and AI.
South Florida. And you'll see the Azure Synapse Analytics overview.
Okay, I am in it.
All right.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much, Adriana. This was super great.
Hey, thank you, Jessica. We really appreciate here the South Florida Power BI user group for you making the time, and as well as those attending to make the time in their busy schedule, and for you, especially for also all the preparation involved here and the time to practice, research, etc., and be able to deliver this very successful presentation covering the successful Power BI report implementation challenges and solutions. You know, really appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, you guys. It was great to meet you. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I do respond, I do answer, and I do answer questions if I have answers.
You see, folks, do not miss this opportunity. You see Jessica information just down on the description for the video. Down you'll see her LinkedIn link. She's also on Twitter. So send her a tweet And as she said, it's easier to reach her on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out there. Any last words here, Jessica?
No, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So thank you. And I learned a lot, which is why I always do these things. So, all right.
Absolutely.
Well,
And let me
thank
see
you.
here. Thank you all for presenting. And sorry. Thank you for presenting. Thank you all for being here. Have a good night. Be well. Stay safe out there, folks. And remember, next week, October 21st, on the same channel, just check it out. We will have the Azure Synapse Analytics Overview Data Lakehouse by James Sarah. And on the following week, which we are going to cover the 10 performance tips to speed up your Power BI reports by Lou Segers. And that will be on October 27th at 4 p.m. All right, look forward to see you all on the upcoming presentations. Thank you again, Jessica. Be well, stay safe, everybody. And Jessica, just hang on for 1 second, please. And
Okay, no
everybody,
problem.
have a good night.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody. All right, this